I'll start off with what confuses me. People calling Star Trek Discovery SJW or woke, as if one, that's a bad thing, and two, that's something new to Star Trek. However, I had a conversation recently that got me thinking. My dad finally got caught up on Star Trek Discovery Season 3. His response surprised me a little and got me thinking that there may be a generational component to some of Discovery's criticisms that don't necessarily make sense to many of us regarding the so-called wokeness. But the conversation goes, I think they are trying too hard as far as diversity goes. It's not that I mind, just looks odd to me. Then followed it up with, I think maybe I'm just old and I do have my prejudices. There are no important straight white male characters. Also suggesting the trans and gay representations are overcompensated. I responded that I never even noticed there weren't any white, straight male human characters this season. I guess Admiral Vance would be, but how important is he really? And of course, Saru is played by a white, straight, cisgender actor. It got me thinking, when people do a show, the straight white male is usually the default character, and when that's missing, it catches some people off guard. Hardly an original observation, I know, but bear with me. To me, honestly, I didn't even notice that Discovery Season 3 was missing that in its lead characters. Partly because Saru, the captain this season, is played by that, but also probably because of what I've personally been exposed to. I was in the Navy for 10 years, surrounded by the Navy melting pot, as well as having lived in the Seattle, Washington area for the last 12 years, which is a very liberal or very culturally progressive city. And my favorite captain when I was on the ship was a female. And I've had conversations about respecting people's preferred pronoun choices. So things that may seem odd to someone who hasn't had those lived experiences, having lived most of their lives having no idea about homosexual or transgender issues, and seeing their own demographic always represented in TV shows is it's what's jarring to some people about Star Trek Discovery, and they don't see themselves being represented. It also inadvertently proves why diversity and representation are important. Many of our lived experiences don't expose us to the lived experiences of marginalized groups, and gives those of us who are white, male, cisgender, heterosexual, or otherwise privileged the impression we are what a normal person is. And there's something wrong with you if you don't fall into that mold. You can't carry a show. How dare you think you can? I got to thinking some of these conversations aren't this person needs to be canceled moments, but teachable ones. And yes, I'm using my dad as an example, with permission, of course. So I think Star Trek Discovery is managing to do what Star Trek does best. Put historically marginalized people in positions you'd rarely see them in. Or to normalize what should already be considered normal, also without devolving into stereotypes or caricature. I remember the 1990s when the Deep Space Nine episode Rejoined aired. It dared to feature a kiss between two female characters, Jadzia Dax and Dr. Lenora Khan. And that was ridiculously controversial at the time because seeing a love that transcends many lifetimes is inappropriate for a family show, but Kirk or Riker banging aliens of the week is wholesome family entertainment. Watching the Deep Space Nine documentary, What We Left Behind, showrunner Ira Steven Behr actually regrets not going more into sexuality issues during the run of the show, in falling to studio or perceived studio pressure to steer clear of the sexuality and gender issues, with the exception of some surface level commentary, I recommend checking out that documentary. Today on Star Trek Discovery, two men are openly involved and don't shy away from showing each other affection, and the grumblings are probably from the same people who had an issue with the Deep Space Nine episode I just mentioned. To wrap this up, attitudes towards many issues changed tremendously over the last 10 to 15 to 20 years since Star Trek was last on TV. Those of us in younger generations or who have lived in more diverse areas think different representations of diversity are as natural as a rainy day in Seattle. But others think these are oddities given too much visibility. Ironically, proving why representation in popular media is important. I heard a great quote recently: proximity breeds care. Distance breeds fear. So don't get me wrong, justifying bigotry and hiding behind age, generation, or religion is never acceptable. But if we don't realize the teachable moments when they arise, we're missing the point. Ignorance is one thing, and it doesn't necessarily equate to malice.